the exact that you couldn't see unless you're behind his table. So like me. Hey, this is Eric from Out of the Fridge, and we're here with one of our favorite creators, Zack Davisson.
Hi, thanks for having me. Finally, we've been wanting to do this for a while now, actually.
We've crossed paths a few times. Yeah. Rose City 2015 was when we first wanted to have you, and then Emerald City couldn't make it happen.
And now we are at the Lilac City, so if we had enough flower cities, eventually we'll make it. So.
That's true. We'll need, like, I don't know, whatever hippie festival comes next, we'll do another one. Well, thank you, first of all, for being on this show. Zack, we love to start with what is your secret origin? What, as a kid, got you into reading comic books?
I was just talking to my mother about this today, which is kind of funny, because I always tell her it's entirely her fault. When I was a kid, I was really into Conan. Like, I just loved Robert E. Howard and Conan. Yeah. And for one Christmas, like, she went to a used bookstore and they had a big pile of Conan comics, and so she's like, well, I'll get those for him for Christmas. And so I opened up this box and I found all these Conan comics, and they were awesome. They're like the old Gil Kane Conans. Yes. And I don't know what it was, but I fell in love with them, and then I started going out, once I read through them, looking for other comics, and like eventually I'm trying to remember what my first superhero comic was. Oh, I know what it was. I eventually made the leap where I bought an X-Men, because they had some, I think Silver Samurai was in there, and he's like, ooh, swords, I'll get that too. And from then I was lost, it's been down the rabbit hole.
Nice.
And I've done everything in comics. Like, I owned my own comic shop at one point in time. I worked for a comic reviewer. So I think it's funny because I've been to comic conventions under every conceivable pass you can have, pro pass, guest pass, press pass.
Very cool, very cool. I also started with Conan.
Oh yeah,
way back
nice.
Back at the age of 5. My first comic. Zack, what made you think professionally you wanted to get into comics?
It's something I've always wanted to do it professionally in some capacity, just because I loved comics so much, and I thought that it would just be great to be involved into it, but I didn't really know how. And I actually got my start just from coming to a convention and talking to comics creator Tony Harris, who was working on a comic at the time, and we just really hit it off, and he invited me to contribute to his comic, and that was just like this watershed moment for me, where Tony just opened the door completely out of the kindness of his heart, and once that came through, then I thought, wow, I actually can do this, which was a bit of a shock for me to realize that. And then I'm like, well, what else can I do? And from there, I've just been, it gave me the courage to then contact places on my own and sort of reach out to people, and that's just built slowly into a career.
Was this a writing piece, this first gig?
Yeah, it was a writing piece for a comic that eventually hasn't come out. I hope it'll come out sometime, but it was for a comic that he had created called Round Eye.
Okay.
That was this Japan-based comic, and I actually saw his tattoo, which was a kanji tattoo, and so we sort of like jumped off on that starting point.
Excellent. How did you get into translating?
So translating, I lived in Japan for a long time, and I did my master's degree in Japanese. And I'd always thought that doing manga translation would be kind of interesting, but I really wanted to translate certain people. I didn't want to just jump in there and translate like the latest, shoujo romance comedy or something like that. I really have interest in very specific creators, and specifically the creator Shigeru Mizuki. I really, really want to do his work. So for years, I was just knocking on publishers' doors saying like, hey, let's do this. And finally, I saw that Drawn and Quarterly had the rights to his stuff. And so I actually just went onto their website, found the little contact us button, clicked it, and I kind of just introduced myself, and I'm like, hi, I'm your new translator, very nice to meet you. Nice. And I sent them a 100-page translation just to show them what I could do, and they hired me. Nice. And that's been our relationship ever since.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
So when you're working on a translation project, how do you kind of balance doing a localization as opposed to a more direct translation? And is that something that often the creators or the company themselves have input in, as far as them telling you how involved?
So you're really gonna dive into deep stuff here. Like, I don't believe in the idea of localization versus translation. It's kind of a fictitious concept, right? It's like people who talk about, like, oh, I believe in microevolution, but not macroevolution. You're like, sure. Those are not real things. 100% of translations are also localizations. Yeah. It all just matters to the extent of how you do it. And like translation you are always 100% of the time you are essentially writing a new script to fit the pictures on the page, and it's a matter of how much of a how much balance do you have there, right? Because if you actually did direct translation, it's complete gobbledygook. It's completely unreadable, not even well readable. It just is completely unreadable. So you have to transpose that. And for me personally, like I really respect the original artist, and so what I want to do is I want to try and find the artist's intent, not necessarily the exact words they use, so much as what emotion were they attempting to convey with this. And then how do I convey a similar emotion with English so that the reader gets the same impact reading it that I get reading it in Japanese. So that's what I try to do with the translation. There are other people who take it much further, who like I don't put slang or pop culture into my manga, mainly because I don't know any. I'm kind of a fuddy-duddy, so I'm not up on the cool kids and things like that. So and I think that putting that kind of stuff really dates a translation. Like I know some people are like, they put in like, I don't know, like a Tumblr joke or something, and I read that, I'm like, how is that going to read in 5 years when this is faded,
Absolutely.
So I want to make these classic timepieces that aren't instantly dated by slang and things like that. But a translation is always going to be a balance, It's always a collaboration between the original writer and the translator.
Awesome. We had the pleasure of interviewing Ed Brisson a while back, and he does a lot of lettering, and he mentioned specifically when it comes to manga, how that's so different sometimes in the way that the text can just blow up and kind of take over a page, and especially when you're talking like the original kind of kanji and all that, and then blowing that up into English, and you have to be really careful with not overtaking the art. Is that a thing where you worry about like how much visual space you're taking up on the page?
Well, and that's another thing that's very different about manga, is that when you're doing lettering in American lettering, you have control over the size of the speech bubble. But in manga, it's already there. You don't get to change it, right?
Yeah.
You have this much physical space to work with and no more. And in Japanese, because of the condensed nature of the language, you can fit a lot more. Like Twitter in Japanese, 140 characters, you can write a book,
Nice.
But to do the same amount of information takes, like 700 characters of English. So you have to choose what goes in and what can't go in, and space is always a consideration.
Yeah, absolutely.
A lot of times you just have to lose stuff. You're like, all right, it's not all going to fit, so what do I have to cut out of there to deal with the physical space?
Yeah. Awesome. I did have a listener question. Our good friend Josh Pong would be remiss if I did not ask you, what are you currently reading and enjoying?
Geez, what am I currently reading and enjoying? I read and enjoy so much, but I recently made my way through all of Carla Speed McNeil's Finder series, and I was just completely blown away. I think it's just incredible. It's one of those comics that when you read it, you're like, why doesn't everyone read this? And Carla herself is also a friend of mine. She has a real reputation of being sort of a comic book person's comic book. Like all comic book people speak of her with a bit of awe, but regular readers just don't. I know, she's not nearly as famous as she should be. So I really enjoyed Finder. I Am Legend is this great zombie manga, or not I Am Legend, I Am a Hero is this great zombie manga from Dark Horse that was just, I'm so amazed by the pacing that they're allowed to do, because one of the things in American comics is because we have a sort of unstable market, there's this constant threat of cancellation on minor series, like Wayward, for example, right?
Yeah.
So we're not ever allowed to play the long game because we don't know when the axe will fall, right? And because Japan has such a robust market, you had I Am a Hero, which is a zombie comic where the zombies don't appear until like the 230th page, right?
Oh, wow.
Before that, the entire book is just getting to know the characters, so that when the zombie hits, it's really shocking because you've invested a lot of time and emotion in these characters, and then the zombies come, So the pacing is just amazing.
So most of our listeners and viewers know you from Wayward. We've covered Wayward on the show. We're all big fans of it. One of the reasons that I know I break down and get it monthly instead of waiting for the collections is your essays the back. So thank you for that. But I know on the show we talked about love the yokai, love all the action, but one of my personal favorite moments is kind of these small moments. I'm a Westerner, I'm an outsider, so I find everything about Japan just fascinating. And does that frustrate you creatively? And have you talked to Jim about since you guys don't have time to kind of slow down ever, like I'd love to see like what's Rory like in school, just hanging out. We saw a little in the beginning, but I kind of feel like, man, I'd love to have even more of that, mixed in. But I totally understand why you guys have to do it that way.
Well, and that's. I mean, I don't want to give too much away, but that's kind of the plan now. We've built up, like when it first came out, we didn't have an audience. Like we didn't know if we would make it past issue 5. So issue 6, there was the opportunity to finish everything, to just end the series right there, and it was all depending on these sales. And so once we learned that we got to a second story arc, we were like, okay, awesome, and then we went there. And we at Emerald City Comic Con, we kind of had a state of the Wayward meeting where we were very excited to find out that sales are good, and trade sales are really good, and that means that we get to slow down a little bit and really, like take a little bit more time with the upcoming stories, because we're not under the axe anymore,
That's very exciting, actually. That's because I've been loving the book, but that's really my only complaint. It was like action, 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 all amazing action, but that's actually super exciting to hear.
And that's just part of the nature of modern Western comics, is that
for sure,
if sales aren't there, you can't publish on Moon, Dreams, and Beans.
No, for sure.
And you have to build that audience, and so you have to do stuff really. I don't know. You have to do stuff fast, and I've learned Jim's style, and he does an awesome job of coming out of the gate running, which I think worked really well with Wayward, and now we get to slow down a little bit, which I'm looking forward to as well.
Do you have any input on plot points, or is Jim coming to you more for just specifics on culture and yokai?
I have input in that I can input all I want, and he can not listen to me in the slightest.
Sure.
So he basically Jim, one of the great things about working with Jim Zub is that he completely understands that comics is a team sport, and he makes sure that we all are very invested and involved in the team. Like there's none of us that just feels like we're doing journeyman work or something. So he'll send out a script, and we'll all read it, and we'll send back thoughts and stuff like that, and oh, wouldn't this be a good idea? And I'll send stuff to him all the time, and sometimes it'll spark something in him, most of the time not, because he's really already got his ideas down,
Sure.
Every now and then Steve and I together will just tell him no. And that's happened a few times where Jim's come up with this really great idea, and like Jim, they don't do that in Japan. I'm sorry, they just don't.
It's not a thing.
Like one of the ones that was really funny was he wanted to have Ohara wake up in the morning and go take a shower before she went to school. And we were like, Jim, Japanese people don't shower in the morning. He's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, they don't. They take baths at night before they go to bed, but they don't shower in the morning. And he's like, but. I'm like, no, but. This is just, we're saying no here. And he's like, you got it. And he did another one where they had this jail scene, and he wanted this dramatic scene with bars and shadows and all this. I'm like, yeah, sorry, Jim, there's no bars on the door in jail in Japan. He's like, but. I'm like, no. So every now and then we just lay the law down on him.
Nice. I do love how faithfully Jim has researched, and that he pulled you in just so that even though it's a work of fiction, it's all the lore is, I mean, as faithful as you can get in probably a Western comic.
No, and he does, one of the things about my essays also that has been really nice is that from the beginning we had an entirely different plan, and that sort of changed over time. And Jim has really adapted his writing style that I like, where he doesn't have to do exposition because I have the stuff in the essays. So he doesn't have to have the character who sits there and explains everything, you know?
Yeah.
And so that gives him a little bit more freedom in the storyline, which has been nice as well.
So in your essays, it's kind of a blend of specific essays on Japanese culture. Like in the first issue, it's kind of about school and Rory having to dye or possibly dye her hair, things like that. And then mixing the yokai files in there. How do you know when to balance it, kind of depending on when the issue is, what essay to put in what issue?
For the most part, it's up to me. Every now and then, Jim will place a specific request, but most of the time he just doesn't know. He'll send me the script, and I'll just look through it, and something will stand out to me, and it's like, oh, I want to write an essay on this, or I have something specific to say on this topic, and so I'll write it and send it over to him. And I'd say maybe 9 times out of 10, that's how it happens. And then there'll be other times where you're like, oh, I really need. One of the examples was the Ronin. He's like, I really need an article about Ronin because we're introducing this character, and I need the readers to be able to know what that is without having to explicitly tell them. So that was one where he actually gave me a topic. But most of the time it's just up to me.
It seems like they do sync up pretty great. And I definitely enjoy that. I know I tweeted at you recently because I read the one about the jail system and the police in Japan.
That got a lot more reaction than I was expecting. That was good.
Yeah, and I know for me that's one of the things I'm fascinated about with the book is just I feel like I'm getting an education, and that was the most frightening essay so far.
That was a friend of mine actually got arrested and in Japan, and he told me all of that many years down the road. And so after that issue came out, I went out for a beer with him. I gave it to him. I'm like, hey, look, you made it into Wayward. Here's all your experience of going into jail in Japan and all of that.
Nice. So you recently put out your first comic, Narrow Road.
Yes, I did my first own comic that I actually wrote. That was a lot of fun. So that really came out of Twitter. There was this thing on Twitter called Inktober, where
I love that.
Yeah, for October, just a lot of artists like they do, drawing a day or something like that.
Amazing black and whites.
Yeah, amazing black and whites.
Gorgeous.
And so I just saw this guy's art on Inktober, and I thought it was just incredible. He had this really interesting sensibility that was these sort of like Japanese Zen Buddhist parable characters that he was using with this with these animals, with a frog and a fox, and I just thought it was awesome. And I emailed him. I'm like, these are great. I really love your art. And it turns out he actually lives not far from me, and I didn't even know that. Yeah,
nice.
Normally with Twitter, it's like, oh, you live in you live in Mongolia and I live here, but we can still work. But he actually lives. And he said, yeah, I've got these characters, but I don't have any story. And I'm like, well, let me, send you over a story and see if we can do something. And we did, and it was really great. Now, we're working on our second story.
I was about to ask, is there more coming? I really enjoyed the first one.
Yeah, I mean, we're hoping, we kind of made the first one hoping to shop it around to a publisher. We're still hoping that someone will be interested, but if not, we'll just keep going on our own and, for as long as we can, because it's a lot of fun to do.
Are you more interested in doing short stories, or would you be interested in, an ongoing series if one came up?
I mean, I would be interested, but I really like short stories. When I first pitched it to him, I was talking about how I really love Hellboy, the old Hellboy, where Mignola would do just a 1 or 2 issue or something like that. Yeah. And I think that Hellboy lost, at least to me, it lost some of its appeal when it got too much into these sweeping epics,
Definitely.
I love The Corpse and The Iron Shoes and stuff like that. So I'm like, I kind of want to do that. I want to do these self-contained little stories. And I mean, we have an idea that if a publisher wanted to do a longer contained story, we certainly could. But if not, I just think short stories are a great, they're a really great storytelling technique that you don't get a lot of in comics anymore.
Especially in sequential art, we don't get a lot of short stories these days. You get the occasional miniseries, but I feel like often the days of getting one-shots or just 2-3-part stories. You don't see as much. So I was definitely excited to see it, and definitely excited to see more. Would you like to tell us about your novel, Yurei?
Well, it's not a novel. It's nonfiction, so not a novel. But Yurei, the Japanese Ghost, is essentially, that's my master's degree. So I did my master's degree. I wrote on Japanese Ghost. And then because master's degree are incredibly boring and laborious to read, I transposed it into something that was interesting and hopefully fun to read, which is my book. And I did that for this local publisher, and I just signed on to them to do a second book as well, which is going to be pretty fun.
Nice.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite yokai?
Do I have an absolute favorite? I don't know. I've got so many favorites. I love Yurei. Those are my favorite, the ghosts. Yeah. But I love Kappa. I think Kappa are just bizarre and a lot of fun. And the one that I keep trying to convince Steve and Jim to put into Wayward, but I know I'll never win, is Shirime, which translates as eyeball butt. And he's just a guy with an eyeball in his butt, and that's all he is.
Nice.
So I'm a big fan of Shirime also.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, Zach, it sounds like you've done a pretty good job about hyping your stuff. Was there anything else you wanted to tell us about that's coming up that we can look for?
Another thing I'm really excited about coming up is I'm working for Kodansha. I'm doing a translation of the comic Queen Emeralda, which is really coming full circle moment for me, because one of the first things that got me interested in Japan in the first place and Japanese art in the first place was the TV show Star Blazers that came on when I was a kid, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, and that is based off of the comic Space Battleship Yamato done by Leiji Matsumoto, and now I'm translating Leiji Matsumoto's work, which is really cool for me. It's like, this is the guy, he's the whole reason I'm here in the first place. So to be able to do his English translation is just fantastic.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, Zach, I'm glad we finally got to interview you. I feel like it won't be the last time, but thank you for doing it for the first time.
Yeah, thank you
so
very
much.
much.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, man.
Bye-bye.